is the Revisionary Podcast with your host, Juan Carlos. The Revisionary Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Revisionary Podcast. And the crowd goes wild. So yeah, I grew up watching sports movies where kids did that. I've always wanted to do that, and here we are. So that's what's happening right now. I'm really excited for today's episode. First, let's start out. If you've never heard this show before or this podcast, the way the Revisionary Podcast works is we bring on guests. A lot of them are comedians who tell a non-fiction story about their lives. After which, I give them an opportunity to retell the same exact story, except this time, they can change any facts or details that they'd like about their own story. Afterwards, we discuss the impacts of the changes that they've made in their story. And today, we actually have someone who's not a comedian. We're changing it up again. I like to keep you guys on your toes. Also, I think that, I like to keep this podcast lighthearted and fun. And, that's kind of my personality. And that's the energy that I want to put out into the world. But also, I think it's important to, highlight, other forms of telling stories. Ones that aren't necessarily comedic. So I'm actually really excited today because we have Valentina Ortiz. She's my wonderful guest today. And she's actually a storyteller. This is her thing. She goes around and performs all over, telling stories. So this is her specialty. And at the end of the day, this is a storytelling podcast. It's not really about the comedy. It's more about the stories. I always want a good story, or at the very least an entertaining story. So I'm really excited to speak to her. I'm excited to see what, she has to say. And honestly, I'm excited to hear what story she's chosen to share with us today. So that should be really, really exciting. And you know what? I won't even dilly-dally that much. So why don't we go ahead? Without further ado, let's see if we can get Valentina on the line. Hi, Valentina. How are you?
Fine. I'm alive.
You're alive? What's been going on?
Oh, a lot of things. A lot of movements. A lot of things.
So, what have you been up to?
Well, I'm in Mexico. I was living in New York up till about April, and for a couple of years. But I'm from Mexico, and I just finished a project in a very small town in the center of the center area of the country. And I do community projects with storytelling. So I made stories about a river and about the need to take care of the river, of the forest, etc. So louder? Yes. So I made this project in La Huacana, Michoacan, and I just finished, and COVID caught me there. I arrived, and 2 weeks later, there was COVID. So I'm just coming out of the shell, and I've been doing a lot of stuff on internet with the United States, telling stories. So that's been cool, and with Latin America also.
Wow, that's pretty dope that you're out there just still being part of the community and still giving back.
Amazing.
How strong is this? Oh, go ahead.
No, and actually, many of us storytellers have been more active now with the internet functioning this way, connecting us than before. So it's one of the good sides of this pandemic.
How strong is the storytelling community in Central and Latin America, or are you now helping build the scene?
No. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years, but I'm still one of the new guys. And in Mexico, it's not very big, but it's here. And the mecca of storytelling for us in Latin America is Colombia. And
really?
Garcia Marquez, the author of 100 Years of Solitude, that wonderful guy, he actually says in an interview, all I do is just write down on paper the stories I heard during my childhood and youth. So Colombia is definitely a country that has storytelling in their culture. So storytelling in Latin America is everywhere.
Explain to me this? How does it work? Is it all concentrated in one area, or are you constantly traveling across the country trying to find places to tell stories?
Myself, I was in Mexico City for a long time. And now I'm reinventing myself. In major capitals of different states, there are storytellers and there's storytelling venues. Unfortunately, in small towns, there are not. And we have a very, very, very strong indigenous oral tradition. Many of our indigenous people lost their writing when we were colonized. So their culture is kept alive through orality. But it's not considered, it's sort of like art and art craft. And, it's like not considered officially an art. So there's a lot to do in Mexico, a lot to do. And situation is a little delicate politically, so sometimes we don't travel that much.
So let me ask you this: how exactly does one get into storytelling? I clearly come from stand-up background, so I know how that works. But if someone were to decide tomorrow, like, you know what, I want to go out there, I want to tell stories. How do you get started?
Okay, from my perspective, storytelling is an art. So it's like becoming a musician. I mean, there are technical things. There's a strong personal story movement in the US, which is one way. But if you really want to become a storyteller, take any workshop. There are hundreds of them out there, just so you get the basics. And the other thing, I've taught many workshops myself, is I truly believe everybody's a storyteller because you communicate what happens to you and you communicate what you learned as a tradition. Even if you're in the US in a modern city, you obviously learned stories when you were a child. So those stories are in you. You just have to find a way to put them out there. And once you get the basic techniques of storytelling, it's nonstop. You just don't, you don't get enough. And right now it's even easier than before because on internet there are so many workshops. And one direct way is to find this, the National Storytelling Network. They have a huge array of things. And also there's a very interesting movement that just started that's called Artists Stand Strong, and it's here to stay. And that's been connecting storytellers from the US and from the whole world, really, that speak English. And they have workshops, they have a lot of things. So welcome to the storytelling world. But it is something you work on. It's not just you wake up one morning and want to share something that happened to you.
Right. Okay. Well, first and foremost, again, I'm sure our revisionaries are very thankful that you're here with us today. I'm going to go ahead and say the stage is yours. Valentina, please go ahead and tell us your story.
Okay. So my story is like this. About 3 years ago, I cut everything. I cut loose of everything. 30 years career in music. I'm a musician. I'm a salsa drummer. I cut with that. I cut with my 20-year-old storytelling career. I sold just about everything I had. I rented out my house and I left the country. I was exhausted. I was drained. I needed a change.
You were in Mexico at this time?
In Mexico. This is
okay.
Mexico City. So I cut with everything and life takes me to New York City. It's an amazing city. At first, it was very difficult. It was sort of like being in Tibet at facing myself.
Right.
And then I gradually started getting the hang of being alone because I'm a mother of 3, and so I had never really been alone. So anyway, then the Mexican boyfriend sort of reappears, and I come back after a year to Mexico to get married. I arrive and things are so busy that I forget to get married. Okay, things go on.
Hold on, sorry, just for a little bit of clarification here. So you had a boyfriend in Mexico. He disappeared on you.
No, I disappeared on him.
Oh, so you disappeared on him and went to New York.
On everybody.
Oh, okay, and your children stayed in Mexico.
Everybody. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, and then you
dog.
And the dog. And then you met him, and I guess he reappeared in your life, so you came back to Mexico to get married, right?
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
That's what I thought. But then, other things happen. And basically, I leave again. And I have a tour in Ecuador and in the U.S., a 1-month tour in the U.S., and then I get offered my job, the one I had previously, and I stay in New York another year. Okay? And everybody is like, weren't you going to get married? And I had forgotten. I literally had forgotten. Oh, yes, I was supposed to get married, but the guy didn't want to get married after all. So anyway, the thing is, I'm a year in New York, and this time it's much easier, and I'm doing really good. I'm in an all-women's drumming band, and we end up playing in Bermuda. We play in the Carnival in Brazil. I'm working in an amazing park, the Four Freedoms Park. And so that's really great. It finishes, but I still loved it. I'm good as a teaching artist, but there's a community storytelling project in Mexico that I had written 2 years earlier. So I decided to come back to Mexico 3 months to do the project because I am really into community projects, which I've been doing for 12 years. And I say, well, it's only going to be 3 months. And I sublet my room in New York. And I say, well, it's a chance to be with my kids, which I really appreciate. And I come to Mexico. And yes, the project, by the way, is in a very small town in a very violent area in Mexico. It's called Michoacan. So I arrived to the town and, oh, surprise, the following week, COVID is officially announced and we are shut down. So this is March, right?
Right.
Okay. So as best I can, I do the project, and I almost finished the project not in July as planned, but at the end of September. And by then I am exhausted. I am, how would you say? We all are exhausted, but I am. And doing the project, I get to really know the community, and it is a very, very, very particular community that's completely under siege because of the political situation. And there are armed men everywhere, and they're not exactly the police. So that's very draining, and I have several issues. So anyways, I collapse. I get very sick. And the doctors on the phone and the psychologist on the phone. And my best girlfriend says to me, listen, why don't you call my bruja? In Mexico, you have to understand brujas are healers, and we're very used to them because our health system really doesn't provide to everybody. So the healers are very important.
Right.
So, and COVID, everything's on the phone. So I figure, why not call a bruja or a shaman, you could say, on the phone. So I call her. And she barely knows my name, and she tells me these most amazing things. She's a tobacco woman. She works with tobacco. And at the end of our session, she says, I am worried about you. You are divided. You are split up in two. I think you really need help. So I tell her, okay, if you want to help me. And she says, okay, I'm going to go into your inner self, if I have your permission. And I say, okay, and I hang up. Once I hang up, I'm a little uncomfortable, and literally I am falling asleep and it's like, is she in me right now? Should I comb my hair? And actually, it's sort of when you find out, if you're from a Catholic upbringing, there's always somebody when you're very young that tells you that God sees everything. And it was the same feeling, because then you're 6 years old and you don't want to go to the bathroom because God sees everything and he might smell you. And you can't scratch yourself. I mean, it's really uncomfortable. So anyways, 7 a.m., I get a phone call from her. And she tells me, I'm so sorry, but I wasn't allowed into your inner self. You are blocking me. I'm sort of relieved, but, so we both say pending. About a week goes on and something really, really scary happens. And I collapse again. And this time I have this horrible backache right in between my arms. I mean, it is so bad, I am howling at night. Called the doctor can't really figure out what I have. And I have, I'm sort of very nauseous, I'm very weak, and the doctor says you have to rest. And my doctor, I really trust him. But we're not really finding what to do with myself, except take aspirin. And then I get this text message, and it is the bruja, the shaman. And she says, congratulations, I was finally able to enter your inner self. And you had your great-grandfather that was very angry inside you. And he talked a lot about suicide. And I finally let him out. At that point, I'm sort of in shock. And then I remember that it is common knowledge for us that your back, there are many dances in Mexico where you dance hunched, these ritual dances.
Right.
With your back hunched. And the vertebrae that are in the middle between your arms are the ones that open up when you're hunched. And that is the path for evil spirits just spirits of dead people to come in and out of the living. Remember where my pain was?
Mm-hmm.
So I kept on howling and suffering for a couple more days, and then I was better. But it is a lot of information. And I start texting my family members, and yes, it turns out that my great-grandfather was burnt alive in the square of the little town in Zacatlán de las Manzanas during the revolution, the Mexican Revolution in 1914, because he wanted to become a revolutionary. And, the soldiers caught them at the meeting, and he was burnt alive.
Wow.
But no, my uncle says, no, he wasn't alive. For some reason, he died just before. So that means suicide.
Right.
His name, I find out, is Emilio Ortiz. My father was called Emilio Ortiz, and my father committed suicide. And as if that was not enough information, my great-grandmother, we were taught that she died of love. But what I found out is that she was put in jail the day they caught my great-grandfather with her two youngest children. One was a baby and a suckling, and the other one was about a toddler. Mm-hmm. And she stayed in jail for quite some time. She could feed the baby because, breast milk is a miracle. And when she came out, she lost it. And they spread out the kids, and everybody's sort of angry at her because why didn't she raise her kids? And then she died. And at that moment, I realized my great-grandmother died of fear, not of love. Mm. So this revelation has been very important for me, painful, but important, because some of us believe that you carry your ancestors' information, and you act it up again. But the story goes on, I find out recently. So that was enough, because really what happened to me, I was exorcised, right?
Right.
So I am very convinced that I was exorcised, and I say thank you to the bruja again. But yesterday, I am in the state capital, a big city, and I go pick up my blood tests because I'm going to get an eye operation. So you need all these blood tests, and I go to pick them up, and the doctor says something is bizarre here, and I do another test, and oh, surprise. 3 weeks ago, when I was howling in pain because of my backache, which was surely an exorcism, well, no, I had COVID. And
wow.
Now, and yes, COVID apparently has very bizarre symptoms because I never had a sneeze or a sniffle or nothing. I just had this amazing back pain and felt very weak and nauseous. So now I'm trying to put together 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So I went from being in bed to an exorcism to COVID. And now I have to shut myself down to see if I am still positive because I don't want to contage anybody. So that is my story. I'm trying to figure out how to be shut down because I'm always on the road. But I arrived to my little room in Mexico City today at 1 a.m.
And has anyone else around you contracted COVID?
The man I did not marry, it turned out that the project was in his house. So we ended up together in the house, locked down with the pandemic. And apparently he had the same as I did, but much softer. He did lose the capacity to smell and to taste.
Wow.
I just lost the capacity to smell, and it's amazing how you need that. I couldn't cook. I could not cook. Another thing that is embarrassing, but I couldn't figure out when my clothes were dirty or not. Usually you sniffle the sock and say, I can use it a little bit more. You cannot do that when you have COVID.
I didn't even think of that. So
it's amazing. Yeah.
Okay, so I have questions.
Go ahead.
Let's start from the beginning here. Now, you say that you came back to marry this man, but it never happened because you guys got busy. What, like, are there any plans to get married? Like, what's going on there?
Oh no, he's a guy, the kind of guy that loves you dearly. I mean, this is going on for 10 years now. He really loves you. He's a nice guy. But, it's like, why would we want to make a commitment? Like, why would we really want to make a project together? So I'm sick of it.
Okay, you're just over it.
Yes, I was completely over it. And he was going to lend me the house because he was going on tour. He's a musician also.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to be away in the US for 3 months. I was going to be in his house for 3 months doing this great project. And then we would talk. He went on tour for 1 day, and my project lasted 6 months. We still haven't talked. I figure we're not going to get married.
Okay, and here's my other question. So you say that, you just cut everything and went to New York. Was there a plan, or did you just wake up that morning and that night you were in New York?
Oh, no. To cut loose of 30-something years of life is not simple.
Right.
I had to sell a lot of things. I had a humongous collection of musical instruments. I'm a percussionist, so I had like 3 marimbas and a lot of stuff. And no, I was very, very, very sick for a long time in Mexico because of the pollution. And mostly the pollution, but I also discovered that violence is not, when I leave, I realize in Mexico, we live in a constant state of violence, structural violence, and we are afraid. Everywhere we go, you're always afraid. Mm-hmm. Like last night I arrived, just getting out of the bus station, the policeman had to take a chain with a lock on it, mm-hmm. take it off so I could walk out of the bus station into the street. Mm-hmm. What does that tell you? I mean, and I had to walk like 20 steps to get to the street and, be picked up by my son, who had just that day had his window shield broken and everything stolen from inside the car. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was not even 10 minutes of my life in Mexico. So we are always afraid. And people, there's people killed here and there. And every morning on Facebook, there's another woman that has vanished or shown up completely tortured. And I mean, things are rough. So basically, now that I look back, I was sick of fear. Mm-hmm. And my job also is not exactly a safe job inside of an office. So I realized, I said, I was in a wheelchair, I could barely see and I could barely breathe. And I kept telling everybody, I need to change something, this is not working for me. And nobody really believed me. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody's busy doing other things, including my partner. So I said, I'm leaving. And I figured in New York, I'm a U.S. citizen, so I mean, it's easier.
Right.
For me, and I figured there's hospitals in New York. And I left, and I have not been sick since. Even my knee that had me in a wheelchair, even that cured.
Wow. So you might be the first person in history I've ever heard who New York has made things better for them.
New York, I forgot that.
Yeah, no, look, I'm a proud New Yorker. I love New York, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that every time I leave New York, my lungs don't feel a little better. You know what I mean?
Okay, so New York is maybe 20% of what Mexico City is.
Really?
I lived in Harlem.
Yeah, I love Harlem. I was born there.
I lived right in front of, on 110th Street, right in front of the park. Mm-hmm. I was renting a room in a studio. And that particular 2 blocks are not very nice blocks.
Right.
A lot of things going on. But I would walk the streets by myself as a woman, and I discovered that. That is not something, I would walk at night. I would sit in the park at night.
Right.
Something a Mexican woman would not even dream of doing. Not even during the day, you think about where you're walking, what you're wearing, what you're carrying. If you're mugged, well, okay, it's just a phone. I'm not carrying anything. I mean, you're constantly reviewing. If you hear steps, you immediately see who it is. New York is a haven compared to Mexico City.
Right.
Harlem, 3 a.m. is haven compared to daytime in Mexico City.
Yeah, no, look, I'm the first to say I recognize that there are certain areas that, might not be the friendliest areas, but I think by and large, New York City is one of the safest large cities in the world.
It is. And you know how they did that?
No, tell me.
I mean, it's on paper. By investing a lot in schools and education. Not that they're some of the worst schools, public schools
Right.
in the U.S., but still they focused not so much on art shows, but there's a lot of programs of bringing artists into schools and really tending to the community and through workshops and all. And apparently that's the way they managed to make it safer.
That's interesting.
Colombia
Uh-huh.
has several examples of that also.
Oh, that's good to know. So it's funny because I remember I am a product of New York City public schools. I went through public school from, my early days all the way through 8th grade. Once I got to high school, that's when I got a little bougie and went to private school. But yeah, for high school. All right, look, enough was enough. All right. I made it all the way through. But it's interesting because you say that they bring all these artists, but I seem to recall that as my time went on, I had less and less art programs. And as a matter of fact, I remember specifically the art programs that were brought in were I remember in 3rd grade we had all these they would bring in people to do cultural assemblies and teach us about art from different African cultures and show us instruments and stuff like that, which I thought was really cool. And then I feel like by the time I was in 8th grade, I don't even remember having art in the 8th grade. So I definitely got to see that transition from every stage, and it was not an increase. I think I received more art education in high school, but I had to seek it out myself. It wasn't even readily available for me.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't know because I don't know your age and all, but
right. Fair enough.
I know that the official art programs have been canceled and they're taking music teachers out and everything. But I worked for different nonprofits.
Right.
And we would go, and usually they would send us to the most underprivileged schools. We would go way up into the Bronx. We would go to different. I think you're a Bronx boy, right?
Yeah, originally I'm from the Bronx.
So apparently that was the idea to send artists to places with especially a lot of diversity and all. And my experience was good, but I don't know how many. But it's through nonprofits. It's through nonprofits, which I know with the COVID situation are not in a good shape right now.
No, absolutely. So why don't we go ahead and pick this up? And if you could change any details or facts about your story, what would you change? So go ahead and retell me that story.
I gave it quite a bit of thought, and I would like to change. Okay, to make the story short, for me, it is all about violence and fear. And my being in New York City was very liberating, but also very sad for me.
Right.
Because I realized how, can I say one bad word?
Absolutely, go ahead.
How fucked we are in the colonized countries. If that means south, anything south from the border. And how that affects our daily life. And how even the possibility of considering the right, I'm not talking human rights here, the right to be happy is something we do not take for granted at all. And in the US, I see that's what people think about. Okay, what makes me happy? So maybe I have a job I don't really like because I want to pay for my hobby or for my travels, which make me really happy. We don't even have that consideration. I mean, it's just not part of
right.
us. So I would change in my story the following. Many, many years ago in Mexico, there were many, many people. We're talking many millions of people living here and different cultures. But there was one particular culture that popped up in the 1300s. Mexico has civilizations 10,000 years before Christ as a measurement. So in the 1300s after death, this civilization called the Aztecs pops up.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what they are is very outgoing people, and they conquer everything. And they're not very nice people, they're very violent people. They conquer everything from the border, from above, from mid-US to Panama. And they impose these tributes, people, and if you don't give the tribute, they'll just kill everybody, children, women, and men. But they succeeded. It's amazing how they did it. And the only interesting thing for me is that they respected culture. They wanted your money. Well, not money in those times. They wanted your seeds under your cacao and your feathers and your gold, your minerals. But they would let you have your own culture. And actually, they would take whatever good things they found. It's like if your corn god was interesting, then they would just adopt it. Hey, that's a cool guy. We want it also in the Aztec tradition. But in the 1500s, there is a king of the Aztecs called Tlatoani, we call the king, and he is Moctezuma. And for some reason, Moctezuma is sort of not very center, and he does not believe in reason, and he does not believe in science. Any similarity to some orange guy is mere coincidence, right?
Oh my gosh.
So he did not believe in these facts. And he was completely into magic and superstition and all of this. So when the 250 Spanish men arrive to Mexico, he lets them in. And he could have crushed them with his 400,000 soldier army in 5 minutes. But he lets them in, gives them everything they want because he believes they are gods. And unfortunately, the rest of the Mexican people that are not Aztecs are so angry with the Aztecs for what they did that they ally with the Spanish and defeat the Aztecs with the Spanish in front. I think the rest of the story, the outcome,
right,
is that we become a colonized country by the Spanish, who are very sick in their minds. I mean, they're really traumatized about a lot of things. So over 80% of our population die, mostly because of the diseases the Spanish bring, and they kill and put into slavery the rest of us. And because of that colonization is that I have to leave. There is an ongoing violence because of the imperialism of the U.S. that is going on, and that all the weapons in Mexico come from the U.S. We do not have one U.S. Weapon factory. I mean, we do our own stuff.
Right.
It's sort of like not a coincidence that all these weapons are coming in from the U.S. government for the bad guys. So because of this structural violence that does not allow Mexican people to have enough for food, even if I had 3 jobs, I have a master's degree. I am fluent in 3 languages. I'm an Ivy League girl.
Wow.
Just you. Still, I could not make enough money to pay for the basic bills. And I work nonstop, 7 days. Mexicans are famous for our capacity to work.
Right.
That is not a good thing. That is the result of colonization. We think that we are here to work and that we can rest once we die because the church told us that.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these violences are structural, come from history, and that is what I would change. So I would not have to leave my country because I am terrified of walking the streets as a woman. I'm terrified of speaking out as an artist what I believe is wrong. I am sad because over 30,000 people have just disappeared, vanished in the past maybe 6 years in Mexico. Our country has been sold to the mining companies, and that's why we have violence. Nothing to do with other things. We have violence because mining companies are taking the land they bought. So I would change that. So I would not have to go to New York I would not have to sell my beautiful marimbas, my beautiful drums. I would not have to reconsider now, today, of going back to the US so I can walk the streets by myself and not get sick because I'm terrified of seeing armed men in the streets. I do not want to live far from my kids. I am not a migrant. I am a displaced person.
Right.
I would not want to live far from my language, my beautiful culture, my good food. But structural violence is too much for many, many of us. And about getting married, maybe I don't need to get married. About changing my exorcism, I would not change that because I truly believe in magic, and I would change my grandfather being burnt in the square. I would change my great-grandmother being in jail. I would change anybody being in jail. And having COVID, I still don't know what to do about that.
So you still have COVID in this scenario?
No. Okay. So what I would change is, I've really thought about this, is like, maybe it was a mistake coming back from New York to do this project, but it was not, because I had the right to be close to my kids, to see my house again, to work for a Mexican community, that this happened. What I would change is, I was very fortunate to survive COVID because I have a great doctor. I had a phone that I could call him on, and he told me I had bought the medication beforehand just in case, so I took it in this very small town. I would change all my friends that have died of COVID. Just last week, I found out 2 more of my women friends died, and they died because they did not have a phone to call a doctor, because they live in a very, very poor neighborhood with a lot of people, so there's no way you can sanitize or isolate.
Right.
And our hospitals are not nice. Any hospital's not nice, but ours are particularly rough places, and they went to the hospital and never came back. So maybe if they had had a phone, had the information to buy homeopathic medication and the money to buy it beforehand, the possibility of isolating in a nice, clean house with a lot of sunshine. I am almost sure that my fellow musicians that have died, a lot of my musicians friends have died. I'm sure they would not have died. And I'm sure my 2 good indigenous friends, Emilia and Lucia, would be alive right now. And they have the right to be alive.
I really appreciate you sharing this perspective with us, because I think that, especially being born and growing up in the United States, it's very easy to be stuck inside of a bubble where we don't see how other countries are dealing with some of the things that we're dealing with. I know that as a New Yorker, it was hard being stuck inside, and a lot of my friends are stuck in these tiny apartments. But at the end of the day, as bad as our hospitals are, they are probably better than hospitals in poor areas of other countries. So I really appreciate your perspective, and I appreciate you sharing it with us. Go ahead.
The town where I was, the nearest hospital was 4 hours away. The town does not have a pediatrician, does not have a gynecologist, not even paying for it. Yeah, things here are amazing. And another thing that the first world also has to be able to confront COVID, even I know the US is not in a good shape compared to other countries in Europe, but you guys got help. In Mexico, we have no kind of unemployment. We have no kind of support. And so like my fellow musicians, most of them just kept on working as taxi drivers or as whatever. But many, many, many people have had to just keep working.
I'm surprised because, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Mexico like one of the top 20 wealthiest countries in the world?
Oh, no.
Isn't your GDP
I
up
don't
there?
know. We have like one of the, like the second wealthiest man in the world. That's
Right.
Forbes magazine, Mr. Slim. But I don't know the exact fact, but no, we're in a very deep economic crisis.
Really? I always thought that you were one of the G20s.
Oh no, not at all. Not, I'll look it up. Where are we on the chart? But
We'll find out.
just on in education, which is sort of my field, we are the 40th worst countries of the third world country. It's like we're in deep trouble. Yes, no, our economy. The minimum wage in Mexico is $8 a day.
That's nothing.
And just to go have lunch in a decent place, not even a decent place, a basic place, you spend that amount of money. Just to have like a burger in a Burger King, you will spend more than that money. So how do families live on a minimum wage and people commute for 2 hours and et cetera? I have no idea how to do it.
Okay, so I pulled it up. I Googled it very quickly. And according to this website, and I've seen figures like this before, Mexico's the 11th wealthiest country in the world.
Whoa, wow, that's such a contradiction. We have over 50% of our population, and you can Google that.
Yeah.
Well, the last time I did it, we have 52 million people under the extreme poverty level. That means they do not eat once a day, every day.
Right.
And that's 52 million people that do not eat every day. We have people in the mountains starving. Literally, children are starving.
I think
It's so amazing.
I think it has. Go ahead.
I mean, we are an amazingly wealthy country. We have gold, we have oil, we have water. We have so much.
Right.
But it's all goes somewhere else. And so
That's what I was going to say. I think it's more about the disparity between the wealthy and the poor, and how the resources are distributed. But I did know that on paper, because I kind of studied some of this stuff in school.
Interesting. No.
I knew how wealthy Mexico was, which is why I was always surprised when people described Mexico as a poor country or a third world country. I was like, actually, it really is, and it's really wealthy. So I was always curious how that affected the day-to-day lives of regular people in Mexico.
People walk, like you have children that will walk 2 miles just to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
They get to that school. I mean, I just arrived like a week ago from one of these areas. I mean, they will get to that school. I worked in one of those schools with storytelling. They will get to that school and they will only have like 3 hours classes. The teacher's completely underpaid, in a bad mood. And he teaches, they have one teacher for 6 grades. The teacher has to buy with his own money whatever element he wants to use. There's this whole thing about program right now for COVID that everything's online. Come on, these places don't have internet. I was in one of them. We did not have internet. And the kids were trying to follow school on these really second-class cell phones. Things are
that's tough.
Amazing.
Well, I'm going to say thank you again for coming on to the podcast. Before I let you go, we have 2 quick questions. The first is we have a tradition on this podcast of choosing a charity or an organization to highlight and encourage our listeners to support. Do you have a charity or organization in mind for us?
I would say look up Artists Standing Strong. It's this organization of storytellers that are concerned with social justice and all, and they're doing great work, very active.
Sure. And the next question we like to end is, I'd like to ask you for a quick story from your childhood that brings a smile to your face or just makes you feel good inside. Just, one of those good, fond memories that you have.
Okay, very quick. My father was a painter, and we lived on scholarships. So here we are in Paris, and I am maybe 8 years old, and so it's cold out, so the sun doesn't come up before 8 a.m. And my task as a girl was to go buy fresh baked bread for breakfast. So it would be cold out, and it would be dark, and I'd have to walk like 3 blocks to the boulangerie, to the store where they sell the bread, to the bakery. And everything would be dark, and afar I would see this soft yellow light and the sign that said boulangerie, which was the bakery. And I would walk into that magical, and it had, the windows were, foggy because of the heat. I would walk into that place and it was so warm and it smelled so good. I would buy my 3 little croissants and run back to have breakfast. But that memory is so strong in my mind.
That's such a beautiful memory. Like, it's making me smile, and I didn't even get to live it. Well,
storytelling for you.
Thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for coming on again. Do you have any last words for our revisionaries?
Oh, let's all enjoy life. Life is what it is, and we're lucky to be alive.
And where can we follow you?
Okay, I have a very active YouTube channel. You can look me up as Valentina Ortiz Pandolfi, Pandolfi. Also, my website is www.valentinastoryteller.com, and my Facebook with the same names, Valentina Ortiz Pandolfi. I've been sharing a story during the 40 days of pandemic. I shared a story a day as Radio Esperanza, which means Radio Hope. And now I'm sharing them twice a week on my page. So I'm up to 80 stories now or something. So you're welcome to look in. If you speak Spanish, you understand them all. And if you speak only English, once in a while I share an English-speaking story. On my channel, I have a lot of English stories.
Well, thank you again for coming onto the Revisionary Podcast. Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Love to be here.
The Revisionary Podcast.
First and foremost, thank you, Valentina, for joining us. Like, that was... Okay, so here's the thing. When I speak to guests, right, I am listening to the story for the first time, just the same way you guys are. Like, we're experiencing that together, and I never know how they're going to revise the story. And to be quite frank, I think that she just did it in such a wonderfully innovative way. Like, I loved how she did it. I don't think that anyone else has done it in the way that she just did, and I think that was masterful. And I mean, I'm also not terribly surprised, because at the end of the day, this is what she does. She is a storyteller. And I really enjoyed her cadence and like just the relaxed style of storytelling that, that she used for this particular podcast. So that was really fun for me. And wow, thank you. Just thank you, Valentina. So, if you guys are listening to this, do me a favor. Right now, I am preparing for a contest that I'm going to hold. It's going to be... We're going to have a cash prize. I'm going to announce it on social media. So if you're not following me on social media, you're going to miss out. There'll be a cash prize. And basically the contest is just, proving that you've actually liked and rated the podcast. So all the details will be on our Instagram and on our Facebook and on our Twitter. So make sure you're following us there. Revisionary Podcast on Instagram, www.facebook.com/Revisionary Podcast on Facebook, and Revisionary Pod on Twitter. So just make sure you guys are paying attention. Make sure you guys are following along. And as always, I always appreciate you guys. So thank you for listening.
This is